cities, the policy and regulatory issues for Bangladesh. Last couple of years, we had been always hearing about different smart things, starting with the smartphone, the smart TV, smart fridge, and whatnot. So everything is smart, including the human being. And now we hear about a smart city. Maybe in next few years, instead of cities, we'll be hearing smart countries. You never know. The whole country may be smart. But what does the smart means? Here comes the question. When we talk about the smart cities, it should be more livable. When we talk about livable, that means it is healthier, it is safer, more convenient, more vibrant, like that. It should be workable, means more mobile, more innovative and competitive, and also more sustainable. When we talk about more sustainable, sustainability in case of the energy, transportation, and many other things. So, for the smart city deployment to be successful, we need to have our technology quite integrated and smartly deployed so that the range of items that are being covered in the smart city, those can work uninterruptedly. So the deployment needs to be open, interoperable, replicable, replaceable, and whatnot. And with all these, we need to look into the security aspects as well. We just had the session immediately a few minutes before the session was completed. We talked about the security issues where the cyber security comes in. Where the smart cities, the technology is involved, we need to be very, very careful in this particular aspects. Having said all this, the strategy for the smart cities or the policy issues that comes in, it could be in two different ways. We can say that is hard or soft strategy. When we say about hard strategy, it means the materials, the transport, the system, the electricity, and all other things. But when we say about the soft strategy, that indicates the human itself, the knowledge, education, and other things. We need to consider the background, the educational background of our people, that what should be our strategy? Should it be hard or soft? That we need to look into. Well, we have the expert panelists with us. You have heard about them. On my left, we have our friend from India, Mr. Sudip Datta. So we'd like to hear from him the challenge. He had been working with these smart cities for the last couple of years. So we'd like to hear the challenges that he faced while working in this field about the regulatory and policy issues. Mr. Sudip, please.
Yeah, I think, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you very much for having me here. It's a great pleasure for me to be here in Dhaka. It's a city that gives a lot of happiness to come in, so I'm very thankful for having me here. Before we talk about smart cities, I think just to put a background to it is why smart cities. If you look globally around, about 50% of the world population live in city, and they provide 80% of the global GDP is given by this 50% city, who stay in about 25-30% of the area of the city. So 50% population gives 80% GDP, and this 50% globally is expected to become 70% in the next couple of decades. India and Bangladesh has been slower in this regard. We are at around 35%, but even that 35% is expected to increase to 50% in the next couple of decades. So this means that over the next couple of decades, there's going to be tremendous amount of pressure in the infrastructure in our cities. And if we are not able to handle them correctly, then not only will it provide great difficulties to our citizens, but will also stagnate the economic development of the. So I think that is what we really need to understand, that if we are, and the traditional way of infrastructure is not going to be able to handle this kind of population. India is having the largest exodus of people from rural and semi-urban to urban cities. And it is a huge challenge that we are already facing. The other part about is that while the cities are contributing 80% of the GDP, they are also contributing 70% of the carbon emissions. And they are also consuming 2/3 of the electricity. And it is going to increase. So therefore, it is with this context that the smart city has been developed, where the focus is to create infrastructure which will be more sustainable, which will be able to handle higher amount level of population, and at the same time would be able to protect the environment and also keep an economic stimulus. So India, we have started a mission of about 100 smart cities to be launched. 100 smart cities are being launched at one shot across the country. I don't think globally such a exercise has been done. Most of the countries in Europe would be having something like 3 or 4 smart cities, but we have started straight away with 100 smart cities. And obviously this has been a huge challenge. Many of the cities that have been declared as smart cities do not have the basic physical infrastructure, and therefore for them to achieve a smart infrastructure is a big challenge. So the way that we are handling it is all of these 100 smart cities have the starting point of this 100 smart cities was each of the cities made their smart city plans. This smart city plan was based on consultation with various stakeholders, and it was not necessarily technology built. It is not necessary. To develop a smart city does not mean that technology has to be based. For a city which does not have the basic infrastructure, the basic infrastructure is to be provided, but it has to be provided innovatively. It has to be, there are 3 questions that we were asking for every city, is that every project that you are giving, whether it is giving an economic stimulus, whether it is improving the urban services, and whether it is sustainable. And the sustainability part was the most important. So that's how the Government of India started off with this 100 smart cities that has been launched. There was a competition that was done, so all of the cities sent their smart city plans, and every round 10 or 20 cities would be selected. So that was one part of it, and this smart city was very professionally evaluated before it was taken in for implementation. The second part of it, and I think that is an extremely transformative measures, every city had a special purpose vehicle. It was an independent special purpose vehicle which was done for the smart city. The basic idea was that there are so many departments that get involved in the development of a smart city. So unless there is a single individual smart city SPV which has some level of independence, it will not work. So we had an SPV created for each of these independent smart cities. They were headed by an independent CEO. The structure of these SPVs was made in a manner that they had their own procurement processes. They could recruit their own people, and they would be also able to raise money on their own. And of course, they were subjected to an overall governance process. But I think the SPV part of it was very important. Many of the assets were transferred to the SPVs so that they could recycle the SPVs and recycle those assets and raise money from them. Quite a few innovative structuring of financing was done. Many cases, like we had a corporation which was able to reduce energy costs by using smart meters, so that the savings of that engineering cost was captured in a cash flow, and based on that funding was raised. In many of the cities, and because you have an independent SPV, the SPV is now required to raise funds, because budgetary support is limited. It's 500 crores per city. After that, everything else has to be raised by the SPV. So many of the SPVs, many of the municipalities and the SPVs have started something called value capture funding, which basically means that once you are creating the infrastructure, the value of the property increases, or the value advertisement rights increases. So portion of that increase in cost was charged through betterment taxes and was available to the SPV. So I think this was one of the most unique part of it, is that the smart city structure brought in a lot of innovation today, and I think the top 20 cities, we have already about 60 to 70% investment coming in. The other thing that I think was very interesting is that public-private partnership also started coming in into the SPVs, and the basic structuring of the projects that was done very innovatively. So, you know, if you are looking at, say, a typical road project that we normally develop, when you do a road project, you basically say that it is a point A to point B. So you are basically focusing on transferring goods and service from point 1 to point 2. But many of the time what happens is the people who are living on the alignment, they are not benefited directly, or they do not support the project. In case of any of these smart projects, like we had a smart road project, so if we are doing a smart road project, we were creating vending machines on the road alignments, we were creating health vans on the welding, on the alignment, smart poles by which people could be guided to the next destination was being created. So a lot of the local people support was available to our smart city projects, which was not available, and therefore it became very safe, very much more robust and much more supported by the common people. So I think India's smart city we are still at about 25-30% level in terms of disbursement, but it has opened up innovation that has never happened everywhere. We have 100 integrated command center, which are central command center, which every city is handling on its own. And each of these cities are having ICCs, and these ICCs are now serving also the smaller towns. So I think it has been a transformative experiences. But I think what is very important for any country to start a smart city is to start off with an institutional and framework and a reform process before we start off. So it is a very focused institutional framework that is to be built before we move into the implementation part.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sudip. We have heard the Indian perspective and from the Indian point of view. This is very interesting to know that they have started the smart city project for the 100 cities where they have gone through a consultative approach. So they have taken into consideration, or they have taken on board all the stakeholders while preparing their policy and other things. And another interesting part to know is the PPP, private-public partnership. This is an important issue that we also need to look into while considering the smart city project in Bangladesh. The interesting part that he mentioned about the SBP, that is special purpose vehicle, we also need to look into that, whether this should be allowed or not, if allowed, up to what extent and with what facilities that it should cover in. Okay. Thank you. Now, the fundamentals of this smart city would be the connectivity. And while providing the connectivity, we need to mostly rely on the MNOs, the mobile network operators. We have a very strong network of our mobile operators. You know that the country, the whole country, I mean the Bangladesh is covered. The 100% coverage has been made by our operators. It has been declared by our regulators, BTRC. However, we have some challenges in connectivity when the mobile operators are providing connections. We have a representative from our MNOs, Mr. Shahed, who is the Chief Regulatory and Corporate Affairs Officer from Robi. I'd like to hear from him that while preparing the policy issues in case of smart and sustainable cities for Bangladesh, what are your expectations from our regulators? If you could please highlight.
Thank you, Farhad bhai. When we talk about the smart city, we actually and literally means is smart public services, because the smart city end of the day have to deliver the smart services to the public. Now, when we talk about the public services, is all about the connectivity, how each public service is connected to the others and give a greater good to the people of the country, people of the nation. Now, when we talk about smart, smart is not only that it will be digital, is that non-digital items also have to be connected so that it provides the optimum level of communications and services to the people, so that people's life is better. Now, when you look at solving the problems of 2020 and beyond, now 50 years after our independence, what we are looking at, how do we resolve the issues that we are actually encountering every day? Like at this moment, the biggest problems that we have in Dhaka city is the traffic condition. Now, how do we address the traffic conditions using the connectivity, using the smart services? That's what we are actually looking at. We are not only a SIM provider and only giving the connectivity to your mobile handset. We are actually beyond that. Just to give an oversight, just to give an example, is that we are doing an experiment in R&D, basically. How do we actually evaluate and examine and provide a better traffic systems from Hatir Jhil to Gulshan 1. The traffic flow that flows from all sides are actually varies from time to time. Now, when we are doing R&D, we found that the traffic surgeons were actually have to give certain leverage to the what we call the VIPs. Now, we can of course think about that. How do we not allow the VIPs to take the advantage of the smart city? But eventually, that will be impractical, because even if I have a smart city connectivity and the traffic flow that we give, you have to accommodate the VIPs. So we actually look at the how do we actually include the VIP traffic flow so that system can automatically analyze and provide the better calculations and the traffic flow to the system, so that even though the normal traffic flow works with the changed circumstances. Now, this is one example. Now, this is how we are looking at that how do we encounter and how do we resolve and how do you solve everyday problems, and everyday, especially the problems of the cities like us in Dhaka city, where we are actually facing problems every day on many, many parts. Now, what do you need to resolve these issues? Of course, one part is the connectivity. How do you connect it? Now, when you look at it, our streets, we now, mobile operators or digital service providers or the people who are in the ecosystem, we are not looking at the light post as a normal light post actually. We are not looking at the trees that enhancing the beauty of the city. We are actually looking at as an instrument, how do we make those items, what we call is street furnitures. Now, there are many, many furnitures in the streets. The city corporations are working every day, and we are in coordinations with the city corporations to see every items that actually coming to the picture, how those can be made smart. We recently had meetings with our city mayor, where he has given his ambition, and we are actually looking at how do we actually make the our garbage collections more easier. And we are looking at how do we know and at what point of time that the supervisor actually knows that those garbages are full and need to be collected within a certain time. So the vehicle have to be efficient so that they don't have to run every time to check, or we don't have to actually waste energy to collect those garbages. So when we talk about the street furnitures, when we talk about the entire infrastructures, there has to be certain coordination. If we don't have that coordinated approach, then actually we will fail. And this is where I think one of the biggest challenges, and this is where we need the policy changes. Now, when we talk about the connectivity, of course, we need the power. We need, at the same time, the radio frequency, and that's where it comes to the spectrum. Now, if we don't have the educated spectrum, of course, we can be shouted and sweared, and that you can all blame mobile operators not providing the educated services. But end of the day, we cannot provide services unless we have educated spectrum. Now, sometimes we hear from our ministers and the government authorities that, yes, you don't have a spectrum, but you're not buying it. Actually, we are not buying it because it's not affordable. The spectrum price is so high, we don't have even a business case over a 15 years period. Now, 5G or a smart city, you are not expecting a business case or use cases immediately. It will take another 10 to 15 years span for us to make the business case positive. And this is where we are lacking the serious policy failures. I would urge the government and of course the policymakers that you need to look at very carefully that if you are actually looking at the smart city, then you have to provide smart solutions. And to provide the smart solutions, you have to allow us a broader spectrum capacity so that actually we can provide the service to the people. One other aspect that I like to address very quickly, a smart city also means a lot of analysis, a lot of analytics. Without analytics, you cannot actually expect a smart city. Because as I mentioned in my first example, the traffic flow, I have to collect data. Now, the way the Data Protection Act in Bangladesh works, although there is no specific law, the entire gray area has been built in such a way that I cannot actually share any data whatsoever. So there has to be a differentiations between what is customer data, what is a system-generated non-customer data. And how do we actually use those data so that we can actually use the analytics for the betterment of the services, so that we can actually provide better services. Now, the entire situation is such that at the moment we cannot do anything of this. So this is one of the most policy lackings that we have. We need to actually smarten up the policies. We need to come up with better policies so that actually we can provide the services to the people. Unless I can be added any other points. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shahed. So we have heard from the MNOs and who otherwise provides the most connectivity for the smart cities. We came to know from his talk that how they are going about with the R&D for developing our smart cities, especially the traffic system for the Dhaka city. And one very interesting thing that we have noted here that a much coordination and coordinated effort is needed between different stakeholders, which our Indian friends have also mentioned. The coordination is very, very important. Otherwise, to develop the smart cities, it won't be proper without any coordination. The other aspect that he mentioned about the analytics, the data that are being used, that how this could be most befittingly utilized. So all these things when come in, through his talk, what I could feel is he is trying to highlight on the standard that is a global standard when developing a smart city. So the global standard should come in while preparing the policy framework for smart and sustainable cities. We are not only talking about the smart cities, we are also talking about the smart city which should be sustainable. If it is not sustainable, then there is no use of having a smart city. We need to think about on this issue. Now, when we develop this, when we step ourselves into the technology, in another seminar, I said that one of my very likely statement is, if you communicate, you are vulnerable. If you don't, you are irrelevant. So it is up to you whether you like to communicate or you would like to remain irrelevant. To become or to make a smart city, there is a need for communication. It is from machine to machine, man to machine, man to man, and so on. Now, when you make this communication, there comes the risk of, threat. Here comes the point of security issues, the cyber threat, cyber security, and whatnot. We have with us Mr. Dato, Dr. Haji Amiruddin bin Abdul Wahab. I'd like to know from you that what are the security policy issues for a smart city which should be considered while formulating a policy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Firstly, as we all know, when we talk about smart city, I always like to simplify smart city concept as sort of like a use of data or use of technology, basically to create efficiencies, to deliver services for people to live, to work in a city environment safely. So that in general a very layman term to define smart city. And this is where the issue of security comes into the picture. Just now the panelists share about connectivity, right? And then they mentioned they also share about the use of data. I think it is very important for us to understand this issue because once we are connected, just like the chairman mentioned just now, we are exposed. Exposed from being attacked. In the previous session, we have a lot of incidents that may happen to a city once they've been attacked. And there are different types of attacks, from hacking, from denial of service, etc. But another thing that is critical, because that one will disrupt services. Okay? That type of attack will disrupt services. That means if everything, all sectors, whether education, transport, media, or whatever, financial, once they are connected, they use all these technologies to create efficiencies. And once they attack, it will disrupt service. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is on data. And I just been, based on the previous session and to this session, Yeah, based on my understanding is that there is no currently a law or say, law related to protection of data. This is something that I just knew through this conference. In Malaysia, we have a dedicated agency called Personal Data Protection Department. And they have under them a legislative act called Personal Data Protection Act 2010. This was done long time ago, 9 years ago. In fact, currently it is being reviewed. Why it is being reviewed? At that time, we don't have GDPR. At that time, our exposure to data breach is not as high as we used to have. Yeah? Now, data breach is an incident that is occurring not only in Malaysia, and I think it's also not happening only in Bangladesh, but they're happening worldwide. In my previous presentation, if you attended just now, I show a study by the World Economic Forum. The top 5 global risk in terms of likelihood. The top 4 and top 5. It related to cyber attack and also data theft and fraud. So that shows the increasing trend of data leakage or data theft, worldwide phenomenon. And it is important because if you know your personal information is not safe, for example, it's not secured because it is not being protected, how can you guarantee the users of these services or solutions will want to use your services, will want to share their data? For example, if you are in the banking sector, you use online banking. If you know it is not secured, your data can be breached, how confident are you in using it? So the same applies in the context of smart city, and that is why security aspects is very crucial. Security must be not an afterthought. It must be by design. That's why I highlighted and I commended this initiative, this conference, because they incorporate cybersecurity as an important enabler to ensure the success of smart city initiative. You know, because you may have the best, assume you have the best connectivity, you have the best smart transport, smart energy, smart everything, but it's so vulnerable to be attacked, including smart banking. The chances of the success of it will be, I would say, low. I like to give an example, a very layman example of the importance of cybersecurity. In Malaysia, we have a policy, not a policy. Just 2 months ago, the Prime Minister of Malaysia, he has launched a Malaysia Smart City Framework. And under the Malaysia Smart City Framework, which is to be implemented from 2019 to 2025, it has identified 16 elements as a smart city framework based on Malaysia's urban challenges and benchmarking against leading smart cities. And the 5th element, they have one element, they have elements on many aspects. I don't want to go through and read it, but I'd like to highlight one component, which is number 5. Cybersecurity shall be strengthened in smart city context. So that is to highlight the importance of placing security as one of a key enabler or success factors in any smart initiative. So I would like to encourage, I don't want to cover everything about smart city, but because I'm looking from the angle of security practitioner, security and data protection, privacy, this is a component that must or should be there to enable us to succeed in any implementation with regard to smart city. Because if we only think it after we have deployed or implement others, once incident happen, the damage is even bigger. The cost will be even bigger in terms of the success of that smart city system. So that will be my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Dato, Dr. Haji Amiruddin bin Abdul Wahab. So, one thing that I draw from his talk is that by design, if you have noted his talk, the security has to be by design, I mean by default within this. When you prepare a policy framework, the regulations and other things for the smart city, the security aspect within it should come automatically, because this is such an important thing. When we have our system automated or the smart, you are monitoring or you are controlling your, let's say, AC or freeze from somewhere outside from your home, and if that is hacked and you cannot control anymore, you can think what could be the situation. I'm just giving a simple example. Let's say your car is automated, your car is smart, you need to open the window of your car and the system is hacked, you cannot open the window, you cannot open the door of your car. What might happen? So this small thing, when we talk about the security issues, everything, when we make the smart cities, not only, I mean, each of the issues has to be taken into consideration, the security aspect. I shall come on to this when it comes into the earlier part, I mean, law enforcement agencies, the lawful interception and monitoring, if we have time. But one of our panelists, Mr. Syed Almas Kabir, he has joined with us, just probably because of the traffic situation, which we already talked, that the situation of the Dhaka traffic, we need to, if we could have the smart traffic system in place, probably he could have been here well in time. So welcome Mr. Syed Almas Kabir, who is the president of BASIS, Bangladesh Association of Software and Information Society. So I'd like to know from you, please, you can educate the house that how the software industry can support the developing of the smart cities in Bangladesh.
Thank you very much. You see, whenever we talk about the smart city, we are talking about IoT devices and artificial intelligence and big data and everything. And you know that all these devices, all the hardware, they actually will be working on the software. There will be a middleware which is required. There will be a user interface which will be required. So the software industry is imperative in this new shift or in the new era that we are going to see in very near future. So our developers are getting ready. I would say we have shortage of people with skills 4.0. I call them skills 4.0, aligning with the industry 4.0, skills required for that, such as the AI skill or the blockchain skill or the robotics or AR, VR, etc. So we are still in shortage, but from the industry we have taken steps. We have been talking with the academia so that these courses can be incorporated in the 4-year curriculum, in the undergraduate curriculum. And when these students graduate in the next 3 to 5 years, they become ready to embrace the challenges of the 4th industrial revolution with all these technologies, and they will be able to build the smart city that we are all envisioning right now. But at the same time, I would like to take this opportunity. I was hearing, Dato, what you have been talking about, and on actually the last part, because I came late, and you have been talking about the security issue. I believe that this will be a very major, very crucial issue in the next few years. Our government, Bangladesh government, has specific plans to roll out 5G by 2021 and to have 5G network all around Bangladesh by 2023, by end of 2023. So that's the plan. So what I can see, or what I can foresee rather, that there will be an avalanche of IoT. We will see a flood of IoT devices and new services, plenty of new services. Appliances will be talking to each other. We will be controlling our cars, as you were saying, remotely. Even our medical devices, such as my pacemaker, my insulin pump, all these will be having IoT. And just imagine, you were talking about unlock or could not getting out of your car, but just imagine if your pacemaker or your insulin pump gets hacked. And somebody hacks your pacemaker, what will happen? You can actually kill somebody from sitting in another country or sitting in another place. So what we need is, we need very clear, very strict guidelines and new laws to get into that era, the era of the smart city, the era of 4.0 and everything. So that guideline has to be made immediately. I'm not sure if we have any policymakers over here, but I would request through the friends in the media to write about these things, the risks that we foresee. We really need to be prepared about those upcoming threats. I will be talking about a little bit more, but maybe later on this subject. Time nahi amader. So amader time nahi. So I will another thing that I really want to put a stress on is, it's a new thought, just maybe a food for thought, that you see, whenever new technologies come, not necessarily we always adapt them right away. Such as, gene cloning. Cloning has been there for a long time. We all know about the Dolly the sheep. But cloning has not been legalized in most of the countries. Why? Because it can open up Pandora's box. There are ethical issues, religious issues, a lot of other things. Similarly, we really need to be careful about adapting the 4IR, such as the artificial intelligence and especially the robotics. Why? Because, as you know, that there is a prediction, there is a study, not a prediction, there's a study that says by 2025, our RMG sector will lose 50% of the jobs. The 50% of the workers will lose the job in the RMG sector by 2025. That is 2 billion people will lose their job by 2025 in the next few years. Do we really want that? Are we ready to place those 2 million workers in another industry? We are not. We are trying. We are trying to upskill these people. We are trying to reskill these people. But we are not ready to do it immediately. So what I will urge all of you to think about it, and urge the policymakers to think about, to adapt the 4IR, the robotics and the smart city and the IoT by phases, not all at the same go. And there should be some restrictions. There should be some restrictions put on the industries, that you really cannot go and automate your industry overnight and, get all the, lay off all the laborers. You cannot just do that. So there should be a staggered plan. There should be a planned way of adapting the new technologies. So this is a food for thought. A lot of people may not agree with me. A lot of people may think that I am against technology. Of course not. I am a man of technology. But I want to adapt the technology in phases, in a staggered way, in a planned way. So just a food for thought for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Almas Kabir. So we have heard how the software industry would be able to support this switching to our smart city, smart and sustainable cities rather. One thing that I would draw from his talk is that about losing the workforce, that they are going to lose their jobs. If you have noticed that initially I said that our strategy, whether it should be hard or soft strategy. So there, I think the authority should decide that we should go on to the hard strategy or soft strategy. So from the talk of Mr. Almas Kabir, it gives me a feeling that we need to probably focus on the soft strategies first, so that our human capital, our knowledge base, these are improved, and we are ready to accept all these smart items, all the smart things that are coming in the near future. Having said all this, I think we are running short of time now. I should open the floor for questions. The floor is open. You may ask questions to any of our panelists. The floor is yours. Anybody? Everybody is, no, I think there is a hand. Yes. Our friend from India. Yeah.
Thank you. So this is Shushovan Mukherjee from India. So in India, National Critical Infrastructure Measurement and Adoptions, we have an agency called NCIAPC. So in Bangladesh, anything like that? So for impose more governance for national critical infrastructure, build some kind of center of excellence, so that all government stakeholder, different agencies, national critical security can be imposed. Anything like that?
Who would like to take this? Shahed bhai or? Okay.
Yes, actually we have. It was formed, I think, in 2017. However, there was various issues with regards to the identifications of the critical infrastructures, or the KPI. And as a result, government has given or allowed time until 2018 November or December, I think, to identify all the critical infrastructures and then create a coordination committee. So it is there, but I think the pace is very slow, and progress is also very limited.
Thank you, Mr. Shahed Alam. Anyone else? Please. Could you please give the microphone to him?
Hello. You were saying about the new information technology and stuff like that, but don't you think there should be an awareness program for the general public and almost the normal people, the middle class people? They should have an awareness program from the government, as in for them to know about all of this stuff that you're telling about as now, as they can be informed later on, beforehand. Thank you.
Please, Mr.
Yes, of course. I think awareness has to be there, because when we will be adapting the new technologies, the citizens should be learning. They should know how to use those technologies responsibly. So, because you have heard about, during the seminar, you have heard about the security issues, you have heard about privacy issues. So there are a lot of other risks involved in when you adopt new technologies. So definitely there is no alternative to create awareness. And I think in this case, because all the citizens will be affected, a mass awareness from the government level has to be adopted.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that in India, when the smart city was launched, the first step was creation of the smart city plan. And the creation of smart city plan was an outcome of intense stakeholders discussion. So the level of technology, what is the kind of technology that is required, which are the areas of focus, were all decided by the citizens through an open polling, which was very transparently done, and the appraising agency who was deciding as to which smart city plan would be approved had an access to the kind of polling that is done. So it's absolutely necessary for the stakeholders and the citizens to be taken on board, because this is a transformative program, and it will not work unless the stakeholders are on board. So it will take some time, I think it is certainly required to do so because you will save some time in the beginning, but at the implementation stage, we will certainly get into issues if these stakeholders are not on board.
Thank you very much. If there is any question, I can take the last question, if there is any, of course. Okay, no, there's no more question. Thank you very much, the dear audience. So we had the discussion on the smart and sustainable cities, policy and regulatory issues for Bangladesh. We have discussed, we have come to know about the Indian perspective. We have heard that how India is progressing in these issues. We have also heard from one of the MNOs that what are their expectations from the government, from the regulators, the policy issues and other things. We also came to know in the latter part that how the software industries is getting involved or can support our smart cities. And finally, the most important, the security aspect of it. We have heard from Mr. Dato from Malaysia Cyber Security, who is the CEO of Malaysia Cyber Security. We have heard from him. I'm sure the important issues or the points that has come up, our reporters, they have taken note of it, and it would go up to the appropriate place for appropriate action to be taken on this. I would like to thank the panelists here for your valuable comments, and also the audience, dear audience, for their patient hearing and the invaluable questions that you have raised. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you very much for participating in this seminar. We have another seminar after this seminar, which will be how mobile industry is enabling smart public utilities, hosted by Red Carpet 365 Limited and GSMM. But before that, we would like to serve some crests. I would like to request Mr. Ahmed Imtiaz, CEO Red Carpet 365, to hand over the crest to Brigadier General SM Farhad, retired. Now both Mr. Imtiaz and General Farhad will hand over crest to other discussants. I would like to request, give it to Syed Almas Kabir, President Basis. Thank you. Then Mr. Now to Mr. Shahed Alam, Chief Corporate and Regulatory Officer, Robi Axiata Limited. Mr. Dato Dr. Haji Amiruddin bin Abdul Wahab, Chief Executive Officer, Cyber Security Malaysia. And finally, Mr. Sudip Datta, Partner, Government and Public Sector, PwC, India. Thank you very much, sir, for your cordial participation, and thanks to the audience also. After 15 minutes, we will have another session hosted by Red Carpet 365 Limited and GSMA, how mobile industry is enabling smart public utilities. Thank you very much.